Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at rachaelflick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Today is part 2 with author Leeanna Tankersley. Leeanna is a mother of 3 and a hope warrior. She's the author of 6 books, including her newest book, Hope Anyway. Leeanna is a co-host on the podcast Moms Unscripted, and she's the managing editor of the MOPS magazine. She lives in Central Virginia. Leeanna, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of the Hopecast with me.
I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. We were having an amazing conversation, and you were kind of talking about some of those practices of hope, and that, we think about the grand gestures and the white-knuckled strength, but you were contrasting that and going to tell us about how the practice of surrender has empowered you in your healing and your growth of hope.
Yeah, you'd asked me about vulnerability, and I don't love that concept. But I think one of the things that we're learning more and more about vulnerability is what a strength it is and how important it is in our faith, in our relationships. It's actually how we connect and with each other, with human beings. I'm thinking about the story of Jesus after his resurrection, and he appears in the upper room to his disciples, and they say, "Prove to us that it's you. It's really you, because you died. How is this you?" And what he does, he could have done a lot of things to prove himself in that moment. He could have talked about his miracles or his superhuman strength or whatever. What he shows them is his wounds.
Yeah.
And I love this story
That's
because,
beautiful.
we open we try to show each other our very slick exteriors, and people say, "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can believe you." We open our hands and show each other our wounds and say, "This is what I've been through, and this is how I'm healing." And that's how we say, "Oh, me too. And I can trust you." And so I love the idea, just going back a little bit, I love the idea of vulnerability as a way that we're scared of it, but it's a way that we really connect deeply to each other. And so, one of the most vulnerable acts for me in all of this is surrender. And, after I found out that my marriage was going to be ending, my first reaction, and I'm sure some of you guys can relate to this, was to come up with a great strategy for how I was going to change this and fix it. Right.
Yeah.
So I go through all of my big ideas of how, when we go into a counseling appointment, because we had a counseling appointment scheduled, I was going to kind of lay out all my big plans for changing this person's mind and changing this outcome for all of us. And of course, that was all up to me to figure out and to execute perfectly. And then we got to that counseling appointment, and I realized, that every person in this world has a free will. And they get to do what they want to do with that free will. And that is really hard news. And it's also news we have to accept, I think, especially as we get older. So I realized in that moment, I wasn't going to be able to change the outcome for anyone involved. And I think throughout the process of healing for me, one of the big processes was surrendering and accepting what was really happening. And, when we talk about the idea of surrender, one of the definitions of it is to give up. But the one that I really like is to give back. And, I think we can think of surrender as quitting, just giving up. But sometimes what surrender really is saying, there's nothing I can do to change this situation. And so I'm going to give it back. I'm going to give it back to you, God, because you're the only person, you're the only being in this, you're the only power in this that can do anything with it. And so for me, an act of vulnerability was saying, I'm going to take my hands off this situation. I'm going to let go, and I'm going to surrender it. And I've been reminded since from a counselor that I see, she says, you can't strategize and surrender at the same time. It's opposing energy. Now, how terrible. And I told her, shut up. I told her, shut up. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay you for giving me that advice. Thank you very much. Like, come on. But it has served me, because again, this can be personality driven, but I think this is very human. that we want to jump into a strategy to change and fix things. And sometimes
Yeah.
our greatest posture is surrender. And we see that again in the life of Jesus. He's going to go to the cross. And he says, hey, I know this is the plan, but is there any way that this plan could be changed? Could you let this cup pass?
Yeah.
And God says, no, this is what's happening. And he says, not my will, but yours. And so I take that as one of the things that we need to be paying attention to is our relationship with surrender. And it's hard. It's hard, right?
It's so hard. I hear the Lord speaking to me right now through your words in a situation that I have been as responsible as possible. I've done everything that I can do. I've employed help where I could ask for it. And now I can't do anything, but I want to, jump into my super analyzer mode and like think through it 64 different ways and see if there's some way that I can solve the Rubik's Cube when, I'm hearing even in my spirit, what I need to do is just take my hands off and allow God to do what he's going to do.
Yeah. And it feels like that's a powerlessness and it's an act of resignation. But in reality, that's one of the greatest acts of strength is to say, God, I'm giving it back to you because I'm powerless in this situation. That's one of the steps in AA. Step number 1, admit we were powerless and we needed help. And I love that it's not just true for addiction, it's true for life. There are situations that, our greatest act of agency is to let go and say, God, it's yours. I don't have there's nothing else I can do here. And trying and is banging my head against a wall and it's making myself and everyone else miserable. And so you have to intervene. And so, yeah, that's even one of the chapters in the book, Hope in Surrender. That our invitation sometimes is to put our hope in the act of letting go.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But that is, especially as women, I
Paradox.
think we tend to be right. Exactly. It's a paradox. And I think sometimes as women, we tend to be helpers. And so we feel like the more we can get in there and help. And that's not always the most productive posture.
Yeah. It's definitely a tension of when to participate and when to sit back. And, to allow, like you said, what your therapist said, that those are competing energies to try to solve and release at the same time. And, either we're like in full no bones, right? Like I'm not getting up.
Yep.
I'm not doing anything. I'm not answering my phone. I'm pretending I don't know this exists. Or I'm, totally driven and compulsive. And I have to figure this out all by myself. One of the things that you mentioned in your book is hope and mystery. And I'm fascinated by this. Will you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, I'll tell the story that goes along with that briefly. It was Christmas a couple years ago, and it was the first time that I was spending Christmas without my kids. And so it's just a heartbreak all over again.
Ouch.
It's a heartbreak. It's ripping the Band-Aid off all over again. And to add insult to injury, my twins' birthday is on December 23rd. And so I had missed their birthday and I was missing Christmas with them and I was just disoriented. And I'm an optimistic person. And so I'm sort of always trying to look for the optimism in a situation, but I was having a hard time. And so I was out for a walk and I happened to be walking by this pasture that was completely covered in mist. And I could hear cows in the pasture mooing. So I knew they were there, but I couldn't see them. And, I could hear horses, but I couldn't see them. And as I kept walking and walking, I heard God saying to me, look again. And I would look and the mist would shift and I could see something I couldn't see before. And then look again. And I would look and then, oh my gosh, there's chickens. I didn't even know there were chickens in this. I'm walking right next to chickens. I didn't even know they were there. And over about a 30-minute walk, the mist evaporates. And what I can see is, all these animals, all these trees, a huge pond. I couldn't even see it. And I was right next to it. And God just kept saying, look again. And then afterward, when it all kind of came into focus, it was this idea that what did you do in that moment, Leeanna? What did you do? I did nothing. I didn't do anything. I didn't get about a giant fan and make the mist blow away. I didn't do anything. I just looked. And it's that idea that you were just saying, cooperation, participation, paying attention, and allowing the mystery of God to happen because it is already happening around us. God is at work in these situations, untangling these knots in his way and in his time. And sometimes we need to just keep walking and keep watching. And it's hard. I don't want to do it. I want to get in there and I want to turn the big giant blower on, right? I'm going to get a leaf blower and no, that's not the invitation most of the time. The invitation is to look again and see what I'm doing. And it, again, I want to take us to a story. Of course, I'm very into stories, but take us to a story of Jesus on the road with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. And this is after his crucifixion. He hasn't appeared yet to them. And they're walking along and he comes and he walks with them, but they don't know it's him. And he says to them, well, what's going on? Why are you guys so sad? And they're like, well, didn't you hear? Like everyone in the entire region knows what happened. And they said to this stranger, quote unquote, we had hoped he was our Messiah. And it turns out he's dead. He's gone. The whole dream is gone. And what I love about this story is that the answer that they were praying for, their hope was there walking with them. Think about this symbolically as a metaphor in our own lives, but they couldn't see it.
That's beautiful.
And so what I also reference that story, that there's mysterious things happening around us that we can't always see, we can't always discern. And that those disciples were walking along with their hope hangover. That's what they called it.
That's good.
We had hoped. How many times have we all said that in our lives? Well, we had hoped that we would get this or that it would turn out this way, or that this wouldn't have happened, but here we are. And so we're walking along kind of nursing our hope hangover, but there's great mystery in our midst. And we got to look, we got to cooperate, we got to watch.
I love seeing that story of Jesus through that lens, through your eyes, in that way of he was walking right beside them and they didn't notice and they were in such despair. And there was the answer for their prayers and the support and that person that they loved. And that he revealed himself to them according to his time and his purpose. And that's just right. A huge challenge for my faith is, the footprints in the sand poem is a little trite or cliche at this point, but it's so true that, he promises to never leave us or forsake us. And so if that's true and we can't feel him, then, what's the mist look like in our life that's obscuring that? And how can we lean into the character and person of Jesus Christ, knowing that he's there even when we're not aware?
That's so well said. And it's so important. And I like taking these stories and overlaying them on my own life and think, where am I trudging along with my head down and my hope hangover in my life? And there's nothing wrong with sadness and despair and grief. That's not what we're saying. But where am I thinking that it's all over? And the answer is right there with me. Where in my life is that happening? And could my hope, could my faith could I keep it online for 15 more minutes, while I'm keeping my eyes open? One thing that's helped me with that, Rachael, just to add a quick thing to our conversation here,
please,
is this beautiful quote from the spiritual writer, Barbara Brown Taylor. And I just encourage people to read her. She's a beautiful writer. She has a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark. And that's what these disciples were doing. They were walking in the emotional dark. And going through a divorce, going through the death of a spouse, you're in the dark. And and I read this line very early on in my own journey of loss. And it said this: new life starts in the dark, whether it's a seed in the ground, a baby in the womb, or Jesus in the tomb. New life starts in the dark. Wow. So as we speak to mystery in our circumstances, this is another thing that has really helped me, that throughout creation and throughout nature and throughout our lives, think about the cocoon. The way the wings are formed is through a dark time. And the way the baby is formed, the way new life is formed, is in the ground. It says that you got to shove the oak seed, shove the seed into the ground and it has to break open to become the oak tree it was meant to be. I don't think God sends these tragedies in our lives to like make us into someone, but I think he uses them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we will cooperate, if we will pay attention, if we will walk and watch. And so I love this idea too, that perhaps what we see as an ending holds within it the seeds of a beginning. And I have seen that in my own life. I have seen resurrection and expansion in my own life. And again, like, I don't know if that's been true in your story, but you talk to people that have gone through really hard things, and they often say this, some version of this: I would never wish this upon anyone, but I also wouldn't trade who I've become as a result. And that
Yes.
speaks to the new life that can come from the darkness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about the treasures found in darkness.
Yes.
And if you have courage uh, to walk through that and to have open hands for what you could find, what could be developed, you can choose transformation over bitterness. But it definitely has to be a cooperative experience, that you receive what's there instead of choosing anger and bitterness and hardness, which feel very well like you deserve to feel that way,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
especially if it's something that's happened to you that you don't have control over, it can feel very entitling to be mad about it. But there's such a beauty in receiving and opening your hands and surrender to what could be transformative. One of the things that you talk about in your book that I'm really curious about is hope not being tied to an outcome. And I know for me, I just wrote a post about like imagining my 50th anniversary, right? And that's what the dream was, or the baby, the grandbabies, and the rocking chair on the porch, and the long life together, right? Or even in the aftermath of a loss, that you have hope in a certain outcome, or that God will redeem it in a certain way, and that's what's going to fix it, or that's what you're hoping in. So what does it look like to have hope when none of those things are true?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is so hard. And I've had so many people, well-meaning people, say to me, well, you're going to meet someone else and it's going to
Mm,
redeem the whole situation. And it's like, I actually don't really buy into that theology or that way of living. We have to grieve our losses, and that's an important part of the process, and that joy can come to us after all of that. But so the question is, how do we hope when we have no certainty of outcomes?
hmm
I think for me, it really does come back to, well, first of all, I want to say that, going back to grief really quick, I did have to, part of the way that we are able to hope despite these outcomes is that we participate in the grief. Like, we have to do
hmm
that. We don't bypass that. I remember God saying to me, and this is going to sound strange, but it really did happen: Leeanna, put the 5 stages of grief on a sticky note and put them on a computer and look at them every day, because you
Mm,
can feel like you're losing your mind. And
yeah.
it's like, oh, yeah, that's denial. I'm going through denial today. Oh, that's anger. Oh, there it is. I want to burn the whole house
Yeah.
down. Oh, that's part of
Yep.
grief. Okay. Like, gives you categories for all this. And so I think grief is one of the ways that we move into that. The final stage of grief, they say, is acceptance. And then we can kind of come to the reality. Okay, this is what's happening. Ask me the question again, Rachel, how you asked it.
Yeah. So, we often put our hope in things going a certain way. Or I have hope because God's going to redeem my circumstances and it's going to look like this, or God's going to show his character, and it's going to come through this avenue, or if it doesn't come through this avenue, then I'm getting screwed over and I don't have hope, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
separating the bones of hope from the outcome of how the circumstances turn out.
Yeah, you're answering your own question, because if I think, well, this didn't go as planned, but God's going to bring a new person into my life and it's going to fix
Mm-hmm.
everything, I'm still very attached to outcomes, aren't I?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
still, and there's nothing wrong with hoping and wishing and wanting for good things in our lives, for good things in our children's lives, for good things for those we love, of course. Yeah, I think that we have to be careful that am I just trading the control over one outcome for the control over another? Okay, so
That's
this
good.
outcome didn't work, but I'm going to create control. I'm going to make this outcome over here work so that it can retroactively redeem everything hard I went through. I'm not sure that that's still the plan.
Right.
That's not
Yeah.
letting go and fully surrendering the outcome. Now, I will say, even as I talk about that, that it's the hardest work we'll do as human beings is to say truly and authentically, not my will, but yours. And yet also show up with our desires named, our, what we want and what we are hoping for. But I think at the end of the day, that to release outcomes is to fully surrender all outcomes, and
Mm,
it's really hard work. But this is the example of the Garden of Gethsemane, not my will, but yours.
mm,
We come to God with our desires, what we want. We tell him, could you please let this cup pass?
yeah.
And he says, maybe yes, maybe no.
Mm-hmm.
But what's behind this, I think what's behind surrender for me, and I'm trying to continue to learn this, is I'm not surrendering into judgment, into contempt, into shame, into I told you so, into a harsh parent.
Mm,
I'm surrendering into love. And do we really believe that? When we surrender our outcomes to God, do we really believe that we're surrendering into love? I mean, that's a deeper question, and that goes into how we
yeah.
perceive God. And so if I can also, in terms of like my practices each morning, remind myself that when I open my hands and I surrender my life, I'm surrendering it to God, and God is love. God loves me. God sees me. Then it hopefully that will encourage me in my surrendering practice. But
That's so
oh,
good.
it is so hard.
It is. It is so hard, but I feel again convicted by your words in such a sweet way of
Hmm.
just outcome theology,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, well, I
Yes.
didn't get that outcome, but
Yep.
maybe I'll get that outcome,
Right.
and I think especially in a lost relationship that I mean, I saw it even online in the wake of Micah's death. People were like, well, this guy, was paralyzed, but she can get remarried. So that'll obviously fix it. So even, the culture at large perceives that,
Yeah.
right? Like that one relationship could replace another one. Or
I
one
hear it all
job
the
could
time.
replace another
I
one.
hear it all
Yeah.
the time. One baby is going to replace the loss of a
Yeah.
past baby.
That's, mm,
And I think your phrase outcome theology is, it's not, this is not where we are being invited to put our participation and our faith, I don't believe, because it really is then not about God. It's
mm,
about what we're going to ultimately get that's going to secure our happiness and our sense of control and our sense of, never having to be vulnerable again. And so, yeah, I mean, this is hard work. And what I want to
mhm.
say too, Rachel, that for me personally, this is not a once and for all thing. I don't go off onto a mountaintop and say, God, I surrender it all to you. And I walk down and it all remains surrendered. This is daily for me.
Mhm.
And when
Right.
I start to feel angst inside and I start to get into that moment in my own mind and in my brain where I'm strategizing and I'm fixing, and well, maybe if I tried this or that or this, that's when I have to stop myself. Leeanna, surrender. So
Mm,
sometimes it's 4 times a day.
yeah.
That's fine. It's fine. It's just a matter of remembering that surrender is a practice that we come back to. And when we are making ourselves crazy because we're trying to hatch a plan to fix it all, whenever we are inhabiting that energy, heck no.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not a
That's
way
so
out.
good.
It's not a path out. We believe it is. And I'll tell you something else, Rachel. There's a lot of people out there making a lot of money telling you how if you do these things, you'll be able to cut a path through the woods and get yourself out. And they're teaching people how to do that. And people
Mm,
want that.
Yeah, you
because
want the shortcut.
I can do it in my own power. There's no mystery in that. There's no surrender in that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's also what's hard is there's a lot of voices out there telling us, oh, you can do it. If you get up at the right time of day and you work hard enough and you read and listen to the right stuff, you can cut a path through this and you can bypass a lot of hard stuff. I just don't buy into it anymore. I don't buy into it. And I think actually the path is harder than that.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And there's a predominant ideology in our culture that our best self just lies within us, and we have to actualize that self into being. And so if you try harder, even if that's, you meditate more and, you have a better diet and you spend time in nature, right? Like they're not bad things,
Right.
but the promise cannot be fulfilled, right? You can't shortcut grief or processing or pain or growth or transformation. That only legitimately comes through the hard work.
Yep. I could not agree with that more. And that is one of the main reasons why I wrote this book, because I want people who are in that place of loss, who there's a lot of people trying to give them shortcuts out there. I want them to have a voice that says that if there's not a shortcut out, but I'll be with you as we walk through this. And there are other people who are willing to be with you in this.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Hope anyway, welcoming possibility in ourselves, God, and each other. Leeanna, where can people find this book?
Yeah, you can find it anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any other independent or private booksellers. Hope anyway.
That's awesome. And tell everybody your website also so they can find you there.
Sure. It's leeannatankersley.com. And then I also love being on Instagram, and I'm there, Leeanna Tankersley.
That's wonderful. Everybody go give her a follow. There's just so much richness and obviously the fruit of much deep work that she's done. And there's a lot to glean there. And I'm excited for the listeners to have that opportunity to receive from the treasures that you found in darkness.
Thanks so much, Rachael, for having me. I've really loved our conversation.
Yeah, it's been so beautiful. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of my interview with Leeanna Tankersley on the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. You can find me at rachelflick.com and follow, and subscribe for this podcast on iTunes and on Spotify and Prime. Everybody, I will connect with you next week.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachelflick.com. While you're there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. Also, be sure to click on the social media icons at the top of the page, and you will be directed to Rachael's social media sites. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a review. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.